Imagine building your life on trust, love, and family, only to discover one day that these foundations are built on lies. The life of 42-year-old Jack Adams, who works in the kitchen of a hotel in Antalya, was turned upside down by the events that took place after 17 years of marriage. Let's look at this story together. Jack was married to his wife, Sarah Taylor, for 17 years. They had 3 children, 15-year-old Ethan, 12-year-old Hannah, and 9-year-old Emily. Jack led an ordinary family life with his children and thought everything was fine. But there had been problems in their marriage for years. Over time, they began to disagree, and the bond between them weakened. Finally, in October last year, they divorced by mutual consent. Jack accepted this decision and was about to start a new life. But just 3 days after the divorce, Jack received a phone call that would shake his life to its core. One of his neighbors told Jack, "You should have your children take a DNA test." At first, Jack struggled to understand these claims, but over time, he became suspicious. The neighbors were pointing the finger at his cousin Mark Adams, who had been coming in and out of his house for years. Unable to take it any longer, Jack went to court through his lawyer and asked for a DNA test on his children. The court ordered a DNA test for Jack's 3 children at the Antalya Forensic Medicine Institute. After days of waiting, the test results reached the court. Jack was devastated when he learned the results. It was confirmed that he was the biological father of his 15-year-old son, Ethan. But it turned out that he was not the biological father of his 12-year-old daughter, Hannah, and 9-year-old little girl, Emily. Facing this reality was not easy for Jack. When he turned to his ex-wife, Sarah, and asked, "Who is the father of these children?" the answer shook him once again. "Your cousin Mark," Sarah said. Jack had learned that his cousin, whom he had trusted for years as a relative, and who had been in and out of his home freely, was having an affair with his wife. This was not just a brief fling. Jack was even more shocked by the details he learned from his neighbors. It turned out that his cousin Mark and his ex-wife Sarah had been having a secret affair for 12 years. It had been going on in Jack's home, at his table, and even in his bed. When Jack went to the construction site in the evenings to work, the two would spend time alone in the house. The neighbors noticed, but no one dared to say anything because Mark was Jack's cousin. The hardest thing for Jack was the situation of his children. When his 15-year-old son Ethan found out, he chose to stay with his father. But Hannah and Emily continued to live with their mother. Jack said, "These children are not to blame." "But I think about their future," Jack said. The denial of paternity would completely change the lives of his daughters, who turned out not to have a biological father. Jack didn't want to psychologically damage the children he had spent years raising. But the betrayal did not end there. During the divorce process, Jack learned that his ex-wife had taken explicit photos of him on her phone and sent them to her relatives. By sharing these photos, Sarah intended to make Jack unable to go out in public. Jack then filed a complaint for invasion of privacy. These events deeply affected Jack's mental health. Seeing his life, which he had worked hard for years, destroyed in an instant, psychologically devastated him. But despite all this, Jack did not give up fighting for the future of his children. Jack's story reveals not only the depth of betrayal, but also the depth of trauma a person experiences. It reminds us how fragile trust can be and how betrayal can deeply affect a person. Jack is now trying to heal his own wounds while trying to put his children's lives back together. There are many lessons to be learned from this story. Family ties, trust, and loyalty are the cornerstones of a relationship. But when they are broken, the devastation left behind is felt for a long time. Jack's struggle is an example of perseverance and faith in justice despite difficult circumstances. What do you think about this story? And what would you do if you were in Jack's shoes? Don't forget to share your comments with us below. Jack's life changed completely after this betrayal, losing custody of his children, worrying about the future of his daughters, for whom he learned he was not the biological father, and the slander of his ex-wife had put him under a great burden, both psychologically and emotionally. But despite everything, Jack decided to reorient his life. While seeking his rights in the courts, he also tried to establish a new order with his son. Ethan was his father's biggest supporter during this difficult period. "If it wasn't for my son, maybe I wouldn't have been able to stand so strong," Jack said. Ethan, despite his age, was very mature and did his best to be there for his father. This bond between father and son gave Jack hope again. But life was not getting any easier for Jack. His ex-wife Sarah tried to get custody of Ethan, this time claiming that Jack was not a good father to Ethan. In response, Jack focused on protecting his son's mental health by arranging for Ethan to undergo psychological counseling. Counseling reports showed that it would be better for Ethan to stay with his father. The court awarded custody of Ethan to Jack, which was a major victory for Jack. Jack couldn't forget them, even though he had learned that he was not the biological father of his daughters. Hannah and Emily rejected Jack, choosing to believe what their mother told them. But Jack wanted to continue to be present in their lives in some way. He tried to pay for their education and support them, even from a distance. One day, Jack was confronted by his cousin Mark, the alleged biological father of Hannah and Emily. Mark said he didn't want to take a paternity test and that it should remain a family matter. But Jack stood firm, saying, "If you really are the father of those children, you must prove it." Mark was eventually summoned to court and DNA testing was ordered. The DNA test results proved that Mark was indeed the biological father of Hannah and Emily. However, this did not ease Jack's pain. Mark refused to claim his children and preferred that they stay with their mother, Sarah. Jack was worried about the effect this would have on the children. "They grew up like my daughters. They knew me as a father. I don't know how it will affect them now that they know I'm not their biological relative," he said. Jack decided he had to do something for the future of his children. He started therapy to cope with his own psychological distress. In the process, he met other people with similar stories and joined support groups. Inspired by their stories, Jack decided to share his own experiences. He started a blog, writing about his experiences, feelings, and lessons learned. His blog soon reached a wide audience. People appreciated Jack's honesty and open-heartedness and drew strength from his story. The success of the blog became a tool for Jack to rebuild his life. After a while, Jack decided to publish his story in a book, After Betrayal: The Struggle for Survival. The book became a beacon of hope not only for Jack himself, but also for others in similar situations. His story has raised awareness in society about the effects of betrayal, lies, and family trauma. Jack found himself as an activist speaking out for justice and family ties. Eventually, Jack was able to rebuild his life. Ethan was getting ready to go to college and was proud of her father. Jack was trying to rebuild the bonds between his daughters. Hannah and Emily had distanced themselves from their biological father Mark and wanted Jack to be involved in their lives in some way. This story shows us that life doesn't always go as we plan, but that it is possible to get back on your feet at the end of it all. Jack's struggle proves how powerful justice and love can be. So, what would you do in Jack's shoes? What decisions would you make in this process? Don't forget to share your comments with us.